because I know different trainers have different ways they use umbilical training, and I know there's a trainer out there who uses it pretty extensively to work with dogs when you're out in public and walking. That is not the way I use umbilical training. Another way that some trainers use umbilical training is more in a foster context, where people who have, or people who have adopted puppies, where they have dogs that are potty trained, they'll actually use the umbilical training to work with dogs so that they don't have accidents in the house. That's a pretty common way of using umbilical training, and it's the first way I was exposed to it. And I know we haven't talked about umbilical training yet, but we will. The third way to use umbilical training is to really work with increasing dogs' bonds and connections with humans, and teaching them to refer to the humans more often, to develop a more confident connection with them. And that's the way that I use it the most. The difference between the latter two ways of using umbilical training and the former way, the one where they're actually using it to teach dogs to walk, is that the latter two are actually used inside the house. So umbilical training, the way I use it, is used inside the house to help rescue dogs adapt to their new environments, develop behaviors that will help them be more confident and more confidently bonded with their human companions. Probably the most common question I get about umbilical training is, if my dog is already has a lot of anxiety and is already obsessively connected to me and really what I would describe as a Velcro dog, why in the world would I want to tether my dog to me to help it learn to connect with me, because my dog is already connected? To that, my response is because a dog that is that anxious with you is not confident. This is a methodology I use to actually work to develop confidence in dogs. So with that said, I think I'll just do a quick demonstration of what umbilical training looks like, and then we can talk a little bit more about ways that you might modify it to work with different types of dogs. These two, the first two leashes, the two burgundy and the brown one, are both leather leashes. They're called multifunction leashes. They'll make you work, you can use them in a bunch of different capacities. You can use them to work with two dogs at the same time because they've got actual clasps on both ends. They can actually be strapped over your shoulder, like so. But they also have this floating ring on them. And that allows you to actually, do you see it?
The ring.
Yep, the floating ring. That allows you to put the leash around your waist and adjust it so that it actually will do this. What I find with these leashes is that in theory they're great. I love them. This is my favorite type of leash. I use it for doing breaking up dog videos too. The downside of it is that it can slip a little bit. Okay. So sometimes what I'll do is put a carabiner on it to attach it to my belt or my belt loop, and that will allow me to work with this. When you're working with an umbilical lead, you're going to want it to be short enough so that if the dog is standing next to you, it's actually going to have a little slack. The dog's shoulder should be even with your leg, and then there will be a little slack. We'll talk about that too as I start looking at these with different dogs. When you're using a leash like this, I like to shift it backwards so that if you can see this, the connection is coming around in front of me, and then the leash twists backwards so that I can shorten it up behind my body. Because most of the time when you're working with a dog, it's going to come at you from behind rather than in front of you. If you're working with a new dog in your home, it's going to tend to lay backwards. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but we can talk about it if it does.
We can do it with Sarah too.
Okay, right. So this particular clasp, if you notice on this leash, is smaller than this one. So they're both on the same leash. One is smaller than the other. And that's, you're going to want to put the lighter weight one next to your dog. Okay. Not all multifunction leashes have the two different sizes, but when they do, that's one option. So we don't need to talk about that one. Then we just have our standard leather leashes. I use leather leashes more often than not just because I think I like the give that they have. And you can usually go with a lighter weight. I've got a shorter one and a longer one. The shorter one won't work very well around my waist. But the longer one, you just feed it right through the handle, like so. Sarah, come here. She's going to act afraid of me. So if you look at Sarah right now, I've got this leash around my waist. She's sitting at my leg, and there's a little bit of slack. That would be really the ideal length to work with an umbilical leash. I would typically want to spin it so it's the right length for the dog that I'm working with, and that's where it can get a little tricky. But that's something that most people have a leash like this. Sarah, come here. So if I were to go about my business in my house, I would actually just move as I would. So if I'm, say, washing dishes and I'm at the sink washing dishes and then I turn to put things in the cupboard, the idea is that the dog is going to follow along with me and I'm not really going to change my behavior to work with the dog. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So that is how I might work with a leash.
And would you just, like, if the dog was getting, say, wrapped, just spin and...
I tend to spin a little bit. I work with, depends on the dog I'm working with, but if the dog is fearful in any way, I typically move very slowly in the early stages. So I might work with the umbilical training while I'm watching TV or reading a book or doing dishes. I wouldn't necessarily do laundry. And so I would typically move a little bit more gingerly with a dog that's likely to get nervous. And we'll talk about that more because there are some times that dogs are so nervous that I would not even try this. With a really fearful dog, I would start by just doing it in a chair. Put it on. With a puppy mill dog, I would actually work with a different kind of leash yet. This is just called a long line. This is a 5 meter, so about 16 foot.
I want one of these.
Clicks. Yeah, they're great. And what I do with that is, this one has been damaged. I'll actually attach this to the dog when I can work with the dog comfortably, or when I can get close enough to the dog that I can do it without freaking the dog out. And then I'll have the dog drag the long line around the house. This one's 16 feet. This is probably more of a line that I would use for an outdoor situation. You probably could go with half that length in your house.
This is 16?
Yeah.
Okay.
And what I would do with a long line is let the dog that might be a mill dog just walk around the house with that, and occasionally when I'm in the proximity of the dog, I would pick up the leash and just carry it and walk a little bit away. Notice there's slack on this leash the whole time. And then if the dog doesn't start to get up to move with me, I would set it down. I'm going to walk around the room again. And then somewhere later on, I might come through again and grab this leash again. Guess I could have come the other way. Pick it up, move in the other direction of the dog. But I don't want to have some tension on the leash. I just want to keep working it like that. What I'm doing here is desensitizing the dog to that sense of the leash and to having me hold on to it. Once the dog starts to back away, like here, my dog started working with me, so I will move with it a little bit. Oops, that tripped. I will actually move with it a little bit. So I use that as an opportunity to start working with a dog that is nervous about a leash. And it's a way that I can desensitize the dog to having something on it without it being particularly frightening. The other thing I love about the long lines is that when I'm with a particularly fearful dog, I can use the line to kind of dance into the dog. So I'll kind of notice I'm not looking at her, but I'm bringing myself in and yet never putting stress on the leash. So she's seeing no reason to really get nervous about it. So that's how I might work with a dog that's fearful. Okay?
And then the next step maybe might be the chair.
The next step would be the chair. Once they get desensitized to it, I would work with the dog just maybe carrying it around on the longer line more often. Mm-hmm. You know, so she's too good on this. Yeah, so I might work with moving it a little bit off the ground first before I would go to the chair. So right now I don't have it on the ground. Before I was kind of dragging it and making sure there was some slack, but I would want to be able to get a little bit of weight on that leash before I would go to the chair level. Does that answer your question? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep.
And then I'm dancing. Extreme close-up. The next two types of products are products that are really made explicitly for this type of work. You may or may not want to invest in something like this. They're still really pretty reasonably priced, but this is a product made by PetSafe, or which I believe is the same company that makes, it might be Premier.
Yep, same as
Yeah.
Premier.
You see that?
Yep.
It's a 2-part product. One part is,
Hands-free leash.
yeah, it's a hands-free leash.
My finger was over it.
So this is a Velcro-based leash, which is one thing that doesn't make me particularly comfortable, except if I'm working in my house, it doesn't really matter.
Okay.
I think it comes in small and large. And you can Velcro it onto yourself. And then attach a leash, which also comes in this here. The benefit of this product is that it's got, you can actually adjust the length of this leash. So you can use it for different size dogs. And you don't have to work with it futzing around your waist all the time. So that's a product that's made explicitly for this type of thing.
Okay.
And finally, one more leash. The Kids hand-free dog leash. Got it?
Yep.
It's basically a belt.
Come on.
But it's a belt that doesn't need belt loops, and you can actually work with multiple dogs on this one at the same time. This is not fitted to me, but you just attach a leash to that. So if I had my shorter leather leash, I could just attach it right in there and then attach this to my dog. So those are the types of leashes that I would use. And I honestly don't have one that I use all the time. It depends on the dog, it depends on the situation and what is easily available. So